Okay, we're holding the last perek of Kohelet, chapter 12. We have another week to go, and then perhaps after that we'll do a summary, a review of the main highlights, the main points of Sefer Kohelet, a very important Sefer. For those of you who were not here in the very beginning, Shlomo HaMelech, Salomon, wrote several books. One of them is Mishlei, the other one is Kohelet, the third one is Shir HaShirim. Each one is a little bit different. Shir HaShirim is about the relationship of the Jewish people and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. A beautiful book, as it's called, a song of songs, a love story, as others would like to say, describing the special relationship, the very unique relationship between us and the Almighty, between us and God. In describing that relationship, he goes on to describe in a very poetic form the history of the Jewish people, and of course bringing out the importance of that bond, that connection that we have with Hashem, which really depends on how much we observe the mitzvot or not. That is how close we can be to Him. A closeness that everybody would love to have with their spouse. In other words, in relating to us how beautiful the experience, the closeness we can have with Hashem, He relates it to us in terms that we can understand, in human terms, the closeness between husband and wife who are very, very close. In Mishlei, he discusses in various parables, that's what Mishalim are, much of the wisdom that he has, that he wants to share with us, wisdom of life, that many seem to learn the hard way, through experience. He says, why learn the hard way when I can give it to you up front? You know, be careful with this, make sure you emphasize that, realize what true priorities are, and so forth. A beautiful book which we've already covered years ago, and it's available for you, for those of you who want to hear the recordings of those shiurim. In Kohelet, which some say he wrote towards the end of his life, Shlomo HaMelech looks back at life. He's looking back, a short life, a total of 52 years, where he says, as he begins his book with Hevel Havalim, it's all vanities. It's a shame that people attribute too much importance to shtuyot. As we say in Hebrew, there are many, many shtuyot in life, a lot of nonsense, a lot of things that are so insignificant, so silly, and people make a big deal, a big fuss about these things. People don't realize what's important, people don't pay attention to what they should be paying attention. People are half asleep, even though they're awake, they're half asleep. They're not focused on the reality, on the mitziyut, on the tachlit of life. And because of that, they make many mistakes, and so forth. Very, very important book. I really, really hold that whoever learns Kohelet and Mishlei, and of course, Pirkei Avot, B'ezrat Hashem, and other books that the rabbis put together, will have a total different understanding of life. And this will help him greatly, not only in life as a whole, in managing his affairs, but as a family man, as a father, as a friend, as a neighbor. It will help us in so many ways in realizing that there's no reason to be jealous, there's no reason to be worried, there's no reason to stress ourselves. If we only understand how the mechanisms of creation function. Now, we are definitely limited. We cannot possibly understand everything that there is to understand. We're obviously only human, and we do not have a direct line to God and so that He can explain to us everything, and we only live so many years. There's so much to learn. Nonetheless, the more knowledgeable we are with Torah, the more knowledgeable we are in being able to understand all this chokhmah that is written, that is documented, we will be greatly benefited by this. It will make a big impact in our life. There are a lot of individuals that had they known these things, their life would have been completely different. Mikatze lekatze. It was from one end to another, completely different. They would not have done certain things. They would not have worried themselves to death. So it makes a big difference. So that's why I think, B'ezrat Hashem B'li Neder, once we finish the book, I'll do a summary, a review of the main points, which is very important. A review highlighting what Shlomo HaMelech wants us to remember. I mean, he wants us to remember everything, but briefly, what are the main points of this book? The last chapter is a little depressing. I'm warning you. It's depressing because he's going to get into a description of the latter stage in our life, when people get old, and how people appear when they're very, very old and weak. And it's not so easy. It's not so easy seeing people in their older age, especially those who are close to us, our own parents, our own relatives. But obviously we need to take note of this, because hopefully we're going to be old too. I say hopefully because B'ezrat Hashem, we should leave this world years from now, right? 120, as they say. So we all become old. We all get, hopefully, to that stage, and we need to prepare ourselves properly to get it to that stage. So he's going to get into detail of how that stage is like. But before we begin with that description, the first pasuk reads as follows. The last thing we said in the previous perek was that the youth can be very fun, a lot of fun. And Shlomo Melech seems to be saying, enjoy yourself, have a good time. But he also says, be very careful with how you enjoy yourself, because in the end you're going to have to give a din v'cheshbon, you're going to have to give an accounting for everything that you've done. That you did not overdo it, that you did not exaggerate, that what you did, the fun that you had, was kosher. Because there is fun that's kosher, and there is fun that's not kosher. Right? You can have a good time, you can have a beautiful home, you can have a lot of nice and good things, furniture, cars, and so forth, and still be a very good observant Jew. It's not a contradiction. Judaism believes that life was given to us for us to enjoy, not to deprive ourselves. But be careful not to give it, not to assign it, not to attribute to it too much importance. Because that's not what life is all about. That's just part of living. But that's not what life is all about. So don't spend too much time or money on these vanities, as he's called them all about. So in Perek Yud Bet, he continues on. There's a little bit of a continuation. And he says like this, listen. Very, very important that when you're young, especially when you're young, when you're young, that is the time that you should remind yourself, that is the time that you should remember who your Creator is. What does that mean? That is the time where you want to develop your emunah. That is the time where we want to be very, very strong in our beliefs, in our observance, in our tradition, in our attachment to that which is important to us. That is the time. Well, what do you mean that is the time? It's always a time. What does it mean, do so when you're young? The reason for that is because there are those who did not do it, obviously, when they're young, and they do not necessarily pick up when they're older. And there are some who want to pick up a little bit when they're older, and it's no longer so easy to do. So he says, remember your Creator when you were young, in your youth. Ada shelo yavo yemei hara'ah. Do so before the days that are not so pleasant. Before they arrive. It means the later years. They're not pleasant. And there will come years where you may express yourself, I wish I would not be around. I wish I would not have to go through this. Some people, their later years are not easy. They're struggling. They're in convalescent hospitals, old age homes. The kids don't come to see them. They're sick, they barely move. We don't know, even if you have good genes, nobody knows what it will be like at that stage of his life. So before that stage arrives, do whatever you can. Don't wait to that point. Don't push things off. Because that point, that stage is not so pleasant. He describes that time of life as Yemei hara'ah. And for some people, years that you will say, Eni b'hem chefetz. Some people would rather not be alive than to be alive during those years. You can see that. You can see it on their face sometimes. They're waiting for the angel of death to take them. They're staring at the wall. The kids don't come to visit them, even though they have kids. They have no interest, no hobbies. They don't know how to learn Torah. Nobody helps them to put on tefillin. They don't know anything because they never learned. Now is not the time to begin. So don't wait for those days to come along, because they would be much more difficult to accomplish what we could have accomplished when we were younger. That's as far as deeds are concerned. That's as far as changes too. You want to make changes in your life. Teshuvah, however, which means repentance, which means regretting that which we did, feeling bad about what we did, making amends, tikkunim, that has a great benefit for doing it earlier the better. And even though I'm going to speak about the teshuvah, which involves the relationship between us and Hashem, in reality, I should add, teshuvah also means between husband and wife. Husband and wife have been fighting like cats and dogs for 40, for 50 years. Somehow they're still under the same roof. Somehow they didn't get divorced. But they fight at least once a day. Baruch Hashem, not more. Once a day. Sometimes in the morning, sometimes in the evening, but just only once a day, Baruch Hashem. But it's almost every day. It's not easy. They got used to each other. They know each other. Maybe they tolerate each other. Maybe they just gave up. Who knows? They're together. Do you know that this couple can do teshuvah between themselves even after 45 years and say the husband can tell his wife, you know, honey, I'm sorry for the 45 years that I've given you a hard time. And she's flattered and she's a little bewildered, surprised. What happened, honey? Why did you say that to me? Did somebody tell you something? You know, and it's the other way around. The wife could say to the husband, you know, I'm sorry, I've given you a hard time. I never made you what you like for dinner. I know. And whatever. This is possible. And you know what? They can have a new honeymoon after 45 years. They can start from scratch. It's possible. They can make a U-turn. It's possible. Does it happen? Very rarely. People don't have the courage to admit their mistakes. That's number one. And number two, they don't always know that they actually made a mistake. They still think they're right. They still think it's the other person's fault. Oh, it's your mother's fault. Whatever. They always have somebody else to blame except for themselves. But you know it's possible. Now, okay, let's say it's possible. They're both in their 70s. In their 70s, Baruch Hashem, they're healthy. They go for walks together, they go shopping. And even when they shop, they argue. We don't need tomatoes. No, we do need tomatoes. You know, our people who argue, they argue about everything. What did they lose out? Even if they make a change in their life and become very nice to each other, what happened? What did they lose? They lost 45 years or more of a marriage, which could have been beautiful. It's very possible because of the bad relationship, the kids learned to behave like that in their own marriage. So even though the parents now do teshuvah and begin to keep mitzvot, keep Shabbat, Kiddush, light candles, or have a good life between each other, they don't have the chance to inspire their kids anymore. The kids are adults. The kids have moved on. It's late. It's too difficult now to change them. They are on their own. They have to figure this out on their own. So what a waste and what a shame. But never late. Better late than ever, they say. You know, obviously do whatever you can. But just realize that it's going to be much more difficult. Habits have been formed over the year. Hergel na'asat teva. Habits become second nature. And people don't like to change. You mean I have to make my whole kitchen kosher? It's because some people did not eat kosher. So, you know, what's involved? Well, you may have to throw out all your pots and pans. And if you may not have to, but you have to make them kosher with hot water. You may have to get a new countertop. I don't know, another sink, a new oven. Who knows? It may involve some work, but so what? If you realize that something is right, you do it. But it's more difficult. People are older, slower, not as interested, not as excited. How much more do they have to live, right? People are easily discouraged at that point. They can easily lose hope. So that is what he stresses. You're going to make a change? Try to do it as early as possible, because later on you may not feel so excited about it. You may not want it. But teshuvah, however, is significant in an early stage for the following reason. Not only for what we just said, that the kids may gain from it, that's besides the point. Teshuvah is important because the more difficult the challenges are, and a person does teshuvah, the more credit he gets. the more Hashem is proud of him. When someone is young and he has many temptations and challenges, he's young, he has all his strength, all his koach, and all the challenges, and he still holds himself back and he resists the temptations. You know what they say, Bashamayim? Kol hakavod lo. We're proud of you, that you actually pick yourself up in the prime of your life, when you're healthy, and you let go of those evil ways. Kol hakavod. Very, very nice. If a person does so when he's 80, Borei Olam, I want to do teshuvah now. He used to be a womanizer. You know what I mean by a womanizer, this man? You know, he used to go chase women. He used to like women, you know. There are people who have that Yetzer Hara very, very developed. Very developed. That even though they're married, they have to go search and they're curious and try out others too. They have a relationship with a lot of people. So when he's 80, he says, Hashem, I want to do teshuvah now. So you know what they tell him? Big deal. Now when you don't care about women and the women don't care about you. now you want to do the teshuvah? Guess what? Upstairs they say, Beseder, welcome. Ahlan wa sahlan. Okay, you're welcome to the club of Balei Teshuvah. But it's not the same. Could you compare him to somebody who's 30 and doing teshuvah? For the past 10 years, from 20 to 30, he was going out and having short relationships, not long-term relationships, you know, with a lot of girls. How could you compare that to somebody who's 80 doing teshuvah? Nevertheless, the teshuvah is acceptable. So teshuvah is very, very powerful when it's done when a person is younger. Doesn't mean you shouldn't do it when you're older. It's just a lot different when you're doing it when you're younger. Rabbis tell us also, the reason why you don't want to push off things, the reason why you want to do things early on, is because it's always easier to pray that one should not become sick than once he has become sick to pray, Hashem, remove the sickness from me. Once a gezerah has been decreed, once a decree comes down, it's hard to annul it, to cancel. Levatel gezerot. Well, you need to have a lot of zechuyot. Hashem says, you want me to take away the sickness now? Pay. How? Bring some merit. Show me that you have some merit, some zechut, that I should, in the merit of that mitzvah, cancel this illness from you. Whereas if a person always prays and begs Hashem, Hashem, please preserve my health, don't let me get ever sick, it's easier because there's no sickness yet, there's no gezerah. It's easier to prevent, and they say this about physical illness in general. It's easier to prevent than to cure. Somebody has cancer, somebody has some problem. It's harder to cure. It's easier to prevent if we know what to do, and we do it. So that's also an additional idea that Shlomo Melech is reminding us. Don't wait for things to become bad and then beg Hashem, please help me. Do things right to begin with, or prepare yourself for those days, for those times, and pray and say Tehillim and do mitzvot in order to prevent these things from ever happening later on. The rabbis, however, say that this pasuk is also talking about the days of Mashiach. Because here, Shlomo Melech is talking about a period of time that is going to be a very, very difficult period of time. It's called a time, Asher Tomar, En li bahem hefetz. At face value, En li bahem hefetz may not necessarily be something so bad. It just means that you don't desire them. But why won't you desire these years? So the rabbis tell us, it's talking about Yemot HaMashiach, and they say it in a positive light. Yemot HaMashiach are days that you don't want to have a certain hefetz at them. Why? Because that is a time that there will be no Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara, the evil inclination, will be removed. The free will not really exist because things will be so obvious that Hashem is the king, that Hashem created the world. And therefore the rabbis say that these are days she'en b'hem lo zchut v'lo chova. You cannot get a merit or a demerit, a sin or a mitzvah, because there's no Yetzer Hara. In other words, so therefore, do things while there is a Yetzer Hara. Do things right at this time, before those days arrive, when things will become obvious. And so they're describing those days as we don't want those days. In other words, that is not the time that we will really have a challenge where we will have to make decisions to do right or wrong. And so they call it Days Asher Ein Lהם Bהם Chefetz, the words that Kohelet uses over here. The rabbis tell us that because those days everything is so clear, Em mekablim gerim limot HaMashiach. We won't accept converts when Mashiach comes. But everybody will see the truth. Everybody will see the emet. No converts. The doors are closed. Yeah, because when things are obvious, then everybody wants to do that. Right now, things are not so obvious. Things are not so clear. People therefore have choices. When Mashiach comes, the choice will be clear. So therefore, we won't be accepting gerim at that time. The Zohar says another pirush that can be added to this pasuk. The Zohar says on the pasuk mipnei seva takum, which literally means you see an elderly person, you stand up before him. That is the respect that we give to the elderly. Those who are older than us are not just older than us in years, but they are also wiser, hopefully. So we give them kavod in various ways. We show respect. So the Zohar says on that pasuk, mipnei seva takum, an additional, completely different kind of interpretation. Before you become old, mipnei seva, before you become seva, before you get old, takum, make sure you get up and do teshuvah. Mipnei seva, before you get to the stage of seva, of being old, make sure takum, make sure that you get up, that you stand erect, in other words, that you correct your mistakes. And perhaps that is the meaning of what the rabbis tell us in Pirkei Avot, ben shmonim ligvura. You know, the rabbis divide life, that different things happen at different stages. What happens at 80? If you get to 80, you have reached the stage of gvura, strength. Strength? What kind of strength? People don't usually have strength at that point. So the simple meaning is that if you've made it to 80, you're strong. In other words, you have renewed strength. Hopefully you can go on a little bit more. Another idea perhaps is, following what the Zohar just said, that make sure that by the time you've reached 80, you have gvura. You have had gvura. What kind of gvura? Ezu gibora koveshet yitzro, that you have conquered your yetzer. Because if you have not done so, you better do it now. Now there's no excuse not to conquer the yetzer. You don't have the tavot, you don't have the desires that you've had when you were young. So make sure by that time you at least are somewhat of a gibor in the sense of controlling your evil inclination. And by the way, when we talk about yetzer hara, we're not just talking about committing averot. We're talking about even midot, character, anger, laziness. People who are younger need to sleep longer. What's your excuse for oversleeping when you're 70? People barely sleep, they 4 or 5, 6 hours, unless they're not feeling well. What's your excuse? In other words, the older one is, the less tavot, the less desires, the less physical needs. There's no excuse. You don't have the same excuse as you had when you were younger. So by the time you get to shmonim, there should be gvura. It should be a strength of being able to control one's yetzer. I, however, wanted to add a different perspective of what Shlomo Melech is talking about as far as the days called Shanim Asher Tomar En Li Baim Chefetz. Years that will come, there will come a time when you will be experiencing very difficult times, very difficult years, that you would not want to be around at that time. He's talking about the Yemot HaMashiach for a different reason. Not for what the rabbis said, that at that time there's no free will, but in a negative sense, in other words, in a very not positive sense, let's say, instead of using the word negative, he's talking about describing the tribulations of Mashiach. Well, right before Mashiach comes, there will be very, very difficult times. Imagine if you're living right now through World War II. Do you know that that was a very difficult time to live through? If you were in Eastern Europe, Western Europe, North Africa, Indonesia, China, Japan, wherever the war was, one of the only safe places was somewhat South America, Latin America, South Africa perhaps. I guess there are other parts of the world that were relatively safe, but where most of the Jewish communities were, there was trouble, hard time, dangers, and war. Who wanted to be around that time? And that's a child's play, as some rabbis have said, compared to what will happen right before Mashiach comes, which will be much more difficult. Right now we're going through a very difficult recession. People are having a hard time, and this is nothing compared to other things that can happen. This is just money. What about fear of nuclear bombs, right? What about fear of the unknown? Earthquakes, tsunamis, all these things, it could happen in a way that we never even experienced or saw in our lifetime, right? So these are the kinds of things, and we don't even know exactly what, but a little bit of what is still to happen before Mashiach comes. Now, hopefully, we will be protected, B'ezrat Hashem. We will be able to see it from a distance and not experience it. That's the key. The key is not that these things won't happen, because they have to happen to an extent. Because Midat Hadin, the attribute of justice, will exact punishment from all our oppressors, all those that caused trouble to the Jewish nation, all those who were evil. Midat Hadin, before Hashem fixes the world, which is what Mashiach represents, He cleans everything up. You build a new building, you demolish the old one. Well, demolition is destruction. And destruction happens in various ways. So there is a lot of not necessarily war, but a lot of all kinds of misfortunes and calamities, all kinds of events that will happen that will shake up the world in all sorts of ways. Natural, and perhaps through war too. And B'ezrat Hashem, for those who have the merit, they will be observers. Only observers. You will be able to see it from a distance, hear about it, but not experience it. Nonetheless, this is an additional interpretation of that time, that period of time, that Rabbi Yochanan and other rabbis in his days express themselves, whenever these days come, Yeteh velo achmineh. Let Mashiach come, but I don't want to be around that time. Now, obviously, they're not talking about just the wars. They're not afraid of wars. They're talking about other challenges that will be around the generation of Mashiach that are very, very difficult challenges to the Jew. One of them is emunah. Emunah will be something very difficult. Faith, believing, just believing. To be Jewish will not be easy today. Had you been living 300 years ago in some Jewish community, it was easier. Everybody was Jewish, everybody was observant, no big deal. They had their challenges too, right? If you lived in Europe, you had your challenges with the Catholics, with the Christians. But as a whole, the challenges of Mashiach will be greater than the challenges that were there years ago. So perhaps Shlomo Melech is also telling us, be careful and be ready when those days come that you have already done teshuvah, because anyone who has not done teshuvah will not make it. That's our tradition. Our tradition is very clear that in order to be able to experience Mashiach, to live through it, you need to do teshuvah. Now, obviously, we have a tradition that Kol Yisrael Yesh Lam Echad B'Baba. Many Jews will have a share to the world to come. They will arise as well, Tchiyat HaMetim. That's something separate. But to live through the whole Mashiach crisis, let's call it the crisis, the whole period where the things really intensify, and you want to have a front seat and nothing should happen to you, if you ever go to SeaWorld, to the whales, and you sit in the front seat, you're going to get wet. Mm-hmm. Some people like getting wet, so they sit there, right? You don't want to get wet, you sit back. They tell you that, right? If you're around the days of Mashiach, you're going to get wet. In what sense? In what sense wet? There's going to be fear. At least fear. Apprehension. People are going to be shaken up. But that may be all. For those who do not have the zechut, they're not going to be able to see the whole thing. They won't be able to survive it. So before these days come, he tells us, make sure that you remember your Creator, in other words, that you do teshuvah, so that, B'ezrat Hashem, we have the merit to experience the full redemption. That's just an additional interpretation of these words of Kohelet. All right. Now begins what I told you before, the depressing part. The Pasukim that deal with the actual physical body, as to what happens to the human being as he goes through life and as he gets older. Pasuk Bet. I've just told you, Kohelet says, that you should do teshuvah while you're young. The younger the better. Let me tell you why. עד אשר לא תחשך השמש והאור והירח והכוכבים ושבו העבים אחר הגשם. Some of these pesukim are going to be a little bit difficult to understand. So what we're going to do is translate it and then explain it. Do so. These are all, by the way, continuation. The first, I believe, about 7 pesukim of this perek deal with the description of what happens to the physical body. And he gets into quite a detail. Make sure you do teshuvah עד אשר לא תחשך השמש, before the sun goes down, before the light goes away, before the moon and the stars are no longer there, and the clouds are gone after the rain. Okay, what does that have to do with anything? He's using descriptions of light in this particular pasuk, or lack of light, to describe the human being when he's active and when he begins to be less active. When he's active, when he's young, is when he's full of light. And as he gets older, that light is diminished. Nהיה פחות, נהיה קטן. And it becomes like the light of the stars or of the moon, no longer the light of the sun. And eventually, there's so little light left that is like during the time it's cloudy, that you don't even see the light of the stars and the light of the moon. When it's cloudy, right, and it's raining. And after that, of course, there's no light at all. That's when a person is dead. So he goes through describing human activity as something that diminishes with time, and therefore don't think that you will be able to take upon yourself in your later years that which you could have taken upon yourself when you were younger. You just may not be able to physically. It may not be possible. That's the simple interpretation of the pasuk. However, the commentaries explain that Shlomo Melech is actually dividing life in 4 stages. 0 to 20, 20 to 40, 40 to 60, and 60 plus. 0 to 20 is the stage of life compared to the sun, when we have the least worries and the least all burden. We don't have problems with parnasah, paying bills. 0 to 20. And that is when a person is happiest, and he's like the sun, full of light, full of happiness. 20 to 40, he's already struggling, trying to earn a living, so it's no longer the sun, right? That's the time when a person is really working hard to make ends meet, and that is the stage when there's a little bit of light, but not as much light as there was when he was younger. The third stage, which is after 40, a person already begins to have worries about his children, marry them off, taking care of them, other needs, right? And he's getting closer to zikna. He's getting closer to his later years, 40 to 60. The light is further diminished. You don't see that happiness, that excitement that he had in the earlier years. And then you have the last stage, which is 60 plus, when a person, of course, is, what does he have to look forward? Hopefully what he has to look forward is to having nachat, to enjoying his kids and grandchildren. Hopefully, he's looking forward to good retirement, but not everybody. Not everybody has it so easy in their senior years. He says these are the facts of life. That's his first description of the various stages and how they unfold. Then he goes on to explain a little bit more. Next pasuk, the days will come, he says, pasuk Gimel, Bayom shiyazu'u shomrei habayit, v'yid'aftu anshe chayil, ubatlu atochanot kimi'etu, v'chashechu haro'ot ba'arubot. You try to figure this one out, it's very difficult. Unless you know very good Hebrew, even then, it doesn't make too much sense. But basically, loosely translate, this is what it says, just translation. Before the following day arrives, a day when the guards of the house are shaken up or have been removed. V'itavtu anshei hayil, and the strong people are completely crooked, dysfunctional, and the grinders have stopped grinding because there are very few left. V'chashechu aroot ba'arubot, and the light in the lighthouses, or from through the windows, you can call arubot, have become darkened. It is difficult to see through them. What is he talking about here? He's talking about parts of the body in describing what happens to the human body as it gets older. So, B'yom she'azu shomrei habayit, he's talking about the bones becoming weaker and weaker. Rheumatism, arthritis, lack of calcium, hip replacement. How's that? That's what shalom. Cartilage, lack of cartilage in the joints, right? All of these problems that people have in their later years is what he's talking about here. These are called shomrei habayit, the guards. These are the things that hold the body together, the skeleton, the bones. The next one is describing v'itavtu anshei hayil, those that are strong, the strong ones, the ones that carry and guard the person, they are the feet. They have become crooked. They can no longer walk properly. How about the grinders? Anybody want to guess that one? That one is easy. The teeth. He says, mi'etu, there's very few left of them. In those days, they didn't have, implants, right? Today, Baruch Hashem, if you lose some teeth, you can get an implant. But they stopped grinding. And then you're eating what babies are used to eating. What do they call those things? Baby food, yeah. But lu atochanot, the grinders are gone. They're not doing the job anymore. V'chashchu haroot ba'arubot, and that's talking about, of course, the eyes, the windows. The windows, as he calls them, we're no longer able to see through them because they're darkened. Windows of the soul, windows of the body, they are the eyes. They're cataracts, not able to see well through them. All kinds of things that weaken our eyesight. That's the fact. Therefore, what? Therefore, at that stage, if you want to do mitzvot, you want to walk to shul, it's harder. You need help to get there. Right? Even for other kinds of mitzvot that are relatively simple or easy, things just become more difficult. Next pasuk. וסוגרו דלתיים בשוק בשפל כל התחנה ויקום לכל הציפור וישחו כל בנות השיר. וישחו כל בנות השיר. Also very difficult to understand, but I'll translate it literally. And the doors in the marketplace are closed. The voice of the grinder of the millstones has been reduced. One rises to the voice or to the sound of a bird, and one is crouching. Yishahu kol benot ashir. All those that are usually singing are crouching. In other words, are lowered, are not able to sing anymore. What is he talking about over here? Also, that the body has become so weak that the doors of the house that usually used to open and close to go to the marketplace, to go places, are now closed. The person is not able to... now, of course, you're going to say, well, we're going to bring him a wheelchair. Yes, but it's not the same. You're, again, having to depend on people. For himself, on his own, without outside help, the doors are beginning to close. And as far as the kol hatachana, what is he talking about over here? He says the person has less appetite. The grinding, here he's talking about the appetite of wanting to eat, the sound of eating. All of that has also been diminished. Yakum lekol hatzipor, this one is interesting. And he gets up to the sound of a bird, he can't sleep well. Every little chirp of a bird makes him get up. Older people can't fall asleep. So he can't sleep well, he can't function properly. Vishahu kol bnot ashir. That ability that he used to have to sing to Hashem and to pray, once upon a time he can no longer do so. It's been vishahu, it's been lowered, it's become weaker. And all those abilities that he once upon a time had, he can no longer use them. Imagine if he used to have a good voice, he could have been a chazan, read the Torah, taught others if he knew, and he didn't. Now he can't. He may not be able to. Do you know if somebody has a stroke, chas v'shalom, he's very limited in various ways, even though he's alive. But the stroke really paralyzes the body in many ways, that it is no longer as functional as it was in the earlier years. Next pasuk. גם מגבוה יראו וחתחתים בדרך וינץ השקד ויסתבל לחגיו ותפר האביונה כי הולך האדם אל בית עולמו וסבבו בשוק בסופדים. Also very difficult to understand unless you have commentaries. You can't make too much sense from what he's saying. But let me translate it for you. They have fears of heights. What is he talking about? He's talking about the older person that at that point he has all kinds of fears and phobias. Gami gavoa, you know. By the way, there are other interpretations. I'm giving you the simpler interpretation. That people at that stage are fearful from heights. They're fearful of falling, of tripping as they walk. And that is what they need, a cane or some other support system. They have all kinds of fears they never had before. V'yanetz hashaked. On this there are two interpretations. What does it mean, v'yanetz hashaked? Some say that Shlomo Melech is describing this individual as he's getting older, his hair is turning white, and the whiteness of his hair is compared to the blossom of an almond tree. You know, he's becoming white, and his strength, of course, is dissipating as a result. Some say v'yanetz hashaked, he's talking about a gibenet, as we call it in Hebrew today, a chatoteret. He's developing a hunchback. In other words, his head is going down. That's what happens to a lot of older people. You know, they can't keep their head straight up; they're going down. That's another interpretation. Vistabele hagav, and his muscles. That's, I guess, one way of describing the hagav. Various parts of his body are becoming heavy. He has, because of all kinds of reasons, the body is just heavier to carry. Istabel hagav. Istabel becomes, it's hard to carry the hagav, which in this case, according to one interpretation, means just all that flesh, all that muscle, all the, you know, the legs. Ve tafer ha'aviyona. Aviyona is the desires. Ove v'lashon ove le'evot. All the desires that one has had, including intimacy, including having children, they're gone. The person at that stage of life has no interest in that, has lost interest, has lost desire. He doesn't care about these things. Imagine then wanting to have children at that point. It's harder. You know, person doesn't have, he hasn't had yet. Now he wants. It's just he doesn't have that interest anymore. Ki olecha adam el bet olamo. It is obvious at that point to everybody that this gentleman, seeing all these symptoms, he's going to his bet olamo, to his final resting place. And v'savevu bashuk hasofdim. When people see him, there's a lot of sofdim already during his lifetime. Sofdim means people who eulogize. People will look at him, misken. People will comment about him. Poor guy. You know, look at him, he's old. So the eulogizers who usually eulogize at the grave are already eulogizing him. They're talking about how old he is, how feeble he is. But Yonatan ben Uziel, the commentator over here that gives an Aramaic translation, he adds another dimension to this. V'savevu hasofdim, the malachim who are in charge of the accounting of mitzvot and averot are already preparing his books. At that point, They are the ones who are running around trying to figure out, in other words, what he has accomplished and what he has not accomplished. Ad asher lo yiratek, or ad asher lo yirachek. I think you read it yiratek. It's written yirachek, but you read yiratek. Ad asher lo yiratek hevel hakesef, v'tarutz gulat hazahav, v'tishav erkat ala mabua, v'narotz hagalgal el abor. Very difficult words to understand, but this is more or less what he's saying. Until the hevel hakesef is shattered. What's hevel hakesef? Hevel hakesef means the rope of silver. There are three interpretations here. One is Hevel HaKesef is the Amud HaShidra, is referring to the spinal cord before it shatters, before it crumbles. And why is it called silver? Some say because it has something white inside of it. Maybe it's referring to the tendons. I'm not sure, but that's one. Describing the Chut HaShidra, the spinal cord. Before that shatters, before that crumbles. Others say, Yonatan ben Uziel says, Hevel HaKesef is talking about that which has the ability to utter silver, the tongue. Before that stops working, before that is able to communicate. In other words, you want to do things while you can, while you're able to talk, while you're able to move. But as I was looking at this today, I reminded myself, Hevel HaKesef is a very interesting description of, perhaps, this is just another idea, of what some people have described when they saw the neshama leave. Either temporarily of a person or permanently. They see like a cord, a silver cord, being attached between the neshama and the body. Some people have seen it, like a silver cord. Maybe, I don't know, I'm not sure if this is a regular peshat, but what he's saying is the same thing. Before that time comes when things are completely gone, when it's already too late. What's v'tarutz gulat hazahav? The tongue is kesef. So what's gulat hazahav, the head of gold? The brain. The brain is the gold. Before that is completely gone. When is that gone? Well, for some people it happens easily, slowly. Dementia. Everybody know what that means? Dementia, forgetfulness, Alzheimer's, right? All kinds of things that people just don't have the brain. They don't have the memory. They don't even recognize their relatives anymore. So before that happens, v'tishaver gad ala mabua, and the jug or the jar breaks upon its source. What's that? Some say it's talking about the stomach. That's the kad, that's the jug that holds everything. Before that stops working well, and you're having trouble with your eating, with the diet. Alamabua could also be talking about the intestines, from where everything is fed. Or it also could be, I would like to say that maybe Shlomo Melech is describing Mabua here in reference to the shalchufit, the bladder. You know, people have a hard time in their later years holding their bladder. Maybe that could also be. Or some are saying that this refers to the liver and to the bile. Okay, either way, these organs, at some point, when they don't function well, a person really becomes very, very uncomfortable. And when you become uncomfortable, you can't just do all kinds of things that you would love to do. And finally, v'narotz hagalgal el abor. The galgal is the head that used to stand up straight, is now laying down in the grave. That's as far as we will go today with the Pesukim. So far, depressing a little bit? Yeah. Now, to finish up, what I want to just talk about for 5 minutes or so is what actually happens at the time a person leaves this world. Right before he's leaving this world, Shlomo Melech describes to us all these symptoms for good reason. Not only should you do teshuvah before that, but take note that the body is falling apart. Take note of that. Sim lev. Time is short. Do teshuvah now. Better late than never. Okay? So, These are signs that Hashem put into place for our benefit. Imagine somebody who dies in his sleep. Well, if it was at the age of 105, beautiful. He lived to 105, everything was functioning properly, and he died in his sleep. Yofi. Nobody wants to die in the hospital with tubes. But what if somebody dies at the age of 40 in his sleep? That's sudden. That's not good. He's not supposed to die then, right? So the normal thing is for a person to live a good number of years and to realize or to take note a year or two before, the less the better, that things are falling apart. Hopefully they shouldn't fall apart, but getting old. You look one day in your mirror, oh, I have some white hair. Yeah. Some people get white hair when they're very young. I'm talking about when you're getting older. What does that mean? What do you think white hair means usually? People get white hair, by the way, from fright, from the stresses of war. They went through war. Some people lose their hair because of that. There's no white because there's no hair left, right? But there are symptoms or signs of zikna, of becoming old, and that's for good reason. Do you know, by the way, who's the first person that asked to become old? Yaakov. Yaakov. No, Yaakov. Okay, Yitzhak also in a sense became, but Yaakov did not just want to die like that. He wanted time. Time to say goodbye, time to give last instructions, time to do teshuvah, to pray. Time. That's a good thing if you have that time. But if you're able to use that time properly, a lot of people have that time, but they don't understand what's going on. They think it's, they're old. Got to go to the hospital, got to go to the doctor, got to go to Kaiser, got to go to Cedars-Sinai, whatever. No, that's not what it's all about. Time is running out. And this is a time, if you haven't done it till now, is to do teshuvah. So the Zohar says, 30 days before a person passes away from this world, he senses something is coming. His neshama senses. Why? Because his tselem has been removed from him. 30 days before the death, the tselem, that image, that which is called tselem, when a baby comes out, he gets a tselem on his physical body. It's hard to describe what it is, but it's like a cover on his physical, which is spiritual. Some would like to say that's the aura that people have seen on certain people through certain cameras. Okay, lo chashuv. The idea is that this is something that is taken away from him 30 days before he leaves. And when that happens, not only does he sense something, even the animals are able to see it on him. This guy's a dead man. Birds and animals in general are able to detect that this man is dying. And there were stories. There was a story, a very famous story running around the internet, for those of you who saw it, about a cat that used to run around in an old age home and always used to spend a certain amount of time next to certain beds. And he always was a person that was about to die. Only the cat knew somehow. Did you hear about that?
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm saying all the details right, but that's pretty much the gist of the story. The cat knew. And she would feel bad, like, in a sense, I wanted to be with that person. Animals know this. The human beings sense something. Sometimes they know, sometimes they don't know. The problem is that not everybody's paying attention. Not everybody thinks about these things. And therefore, they just go on and just take their blood pressure medication, take their sugar medication, take all these medications, but they don't think about what needs to be done during that time. The last day or two or three, maybe even a few more, I don't know exactly how many, if a person is in bed and he's semi-conscious, you may see him say, oh, I see my parents, I see my grandparents coming. He's not daydreaming. He's actually seeing them. You can't see them if you're in the room. He can. All of a sudden they come because they're coming to accompany him. What a person could not see during his life, the rabbis tell us, they show him, they let him see it right before he passes away. Now I have some very interesting news to share with you. Did all of you hear of an individual called, I think his name is Steve Jobs?
Apple.
Yeah. Yeah, I didn't know too much about him because I'm not into those kinds of things. But something was revealed just today in the news, or yesterday. Actually, maybe yesterday or 2 days ago. What do you think his last words were a second or two before he passed away? Wow, wow, wow. That's what he said. Wow, 3 times. Before that, he was talking a little bit, he was communicating as much as he can. But these were the last expressions, a second or two before he passed away. Why did he say that? Now, so what did I tell you? There are a few days before, and it could be a few minutes before. It all depends on the individual. You begin to see all kinds of things you never saw. Some people see things they never believed existed. The spiritual world. Could have been the relatives, or the Malach HaMavet, because the Malach HaMavet is there a few minutes before one dies. A lot of people have said, I see him already, he's come to take me. Yeah. A lot of people have said that. And the second the neshama leaves, a person sees the Shekhinah. Depending on his level, of course. Depending on the level, a person is able to see more or less. In that light of the Shekhinah is something so wonderful and so special that it makes the petirah, the death, so much easier and smooth for him to leave and to want to be drawn to it, to the Shekhinah. So I don't know what he said exactly, why he reacted that way, what he saw, but it's very possible that he obviously saw something that amazed him, something that perhaps he didn't really believe, and something that obviously was most likely good. I think so. But either way, it is possible to see those kinds of things right before a person passes away. The thing, what happens, of course, is some people die or got killed in a car accident. They don't see anything. I mean, boom! But we're talking about a person who was able to experience a slower death, of course, and he was not in a coma, where we were able to hear from him too. These kinds of things. Yes?
Is it true that the Malach HaMavet, his body is covered in eyes, and he frightens the person to death?
Right. We have different traditions about how the Malach HaMavet appears. There are people who have seen him like that, but not everybody does. Others have seen him as a regular person almost. It looks a little bit different, but they know that this is him. The way he's dressed maybe, or the way, it's hard because we never had a chance to ask him, okay, tell us exactly what you see. Describe him in detail. Take a picture for us. No. Right? So we don't know exactly. But apparently, based on what you said, that is true. The Chachamim describe it as something full of eyes. Not everybody sees it as full of eyes. It could be those who are not so good, who had many desires in their life. That's what their eyes represent. All the eyes, all the desires. They see him like that. A representation in that form. But others who are righteous don't see him in that sense.
And the whole
they see him as something, as a malach of some sort, that is more human-like, or appears more in a normal way, but they know this is it. They know he has come to pick him up.
But the nature is a frightening nature.
Yeah, but the nature that is a frightening nature is more to those who are to be frightened. Those who don't need to be frightened, who were able to defeat that Yetzer Hara during their lifetime, I don't think they see the exact same thing. They're not as frightened. And they see him as something other than a monster. In other words, something more normal, more natural, more human resembling, but they know it's him. Anyway, just to finish up, because life is short, and because sometimes people do become weaker and weaker, and are not able to accomplish too much in the last few days or months of their life, the rabbis tell us that vidui, confession, is something that is very, very important to be said at all times, before we go to sleep every day. Otherwise, sometimes people cannot no longer say it on their own while they're on their deathbed. Shem goes to see him, and they have to have other people say it for them. It's obviously better if a person is able to say it for himself. So when people know he has a couple hours or a day or two left, that's our custom, part of the tradition, is to approach him and say it with him, help him say it, that he should say it. A person who dies with vidui, a person who has passed away after doing teshuvah, is in a much higher level than somebody who just passed away without ever doing teshuvah. So even though a person may have done some wrongs in his life, and may not have been able to correct all of them, there's no doubt that there's still a great benefit to his neshama for him to express that he regrets what he did, and that he's sorry for what he did, and that he wish he could correct it. There's a nusach, there's a whole prayer to say that, we're remorseful, we regret what we did, we're ashamed of what we did, and we ask for forgiveness. Obviously, if it's ben adam lechavero, one should ask his friends for forgiveness if he committed a wrong against them. But if it's ben adam lamakom, between us and Hashem, then obviously these are words being expressed to Hashem. Either way, it could be said in the long version, or it could be said in the short version. If you know somebody who's getting close to that point, do him that favor. It's a big thing. It will make a big difference for his neshama. Some people don't get that chance because it's so sudden. When things are sudden, there's no chance to do anything. But when the time comes and the person sees or senses that it's approaching, he should, of course, do whatever he can while he's still alive, while he's still functioning, to correct his mistakes and to do teshuvah properly. Okay.